All right, guys. Well, thank you for the introduction, Robina. Really appreciate it. I'm Dena Vassallo, as she said, and I am with Society. We're a marketing comms agency in Adelaide and in Sydney. And we're a people-first focused business, which is quite literally why we're called Society. And we partner with a lot of quite significant brands in this country and beyond around how they can connect to their communities and where their communities live, work, and play across Australia and into the US to help them connect with those societies more deeply. So these guys were actually one of our first clients. So Violet, Crumble, and FruChocs, great way to kind of kick off the business 4 years ago. We also work with like San Remo, and we're the agency for influencers and PR and content for Woolworths supermarkets nationally as well, amongst loads of government stuff. So back previous to that, just so you guys have some context for, I guess, my experience and what I'm going to talk to you guys about today, is I've been here for 13 years. Previous to having Society, I was with a WPP group as their chief commercial officer through Asia Pacific, opening offices all around the world, but also working on mostly really significant brands as well, like Emirates Airlines, Bunnings, McDonald's, etc. And then previous to that, obviously American, and I spent 10 years working in New York for also a very large agency, working for things like Kraft and Pepsi and vodkas and all of that. So quite a big background at FMCG. Have been on the journey for a long time. Actually with Unilever, we were the first business company in the world to do something with Facebook in a paid sense. So I feel a bit of a dinosaur saying that, but there are some really interesting journeys that have happened along the way to where we're at now and the type of work that we're doing that hopefully we can talk a little bit about today and then answer any questions that you have. Paul's.
That is very confronting. One was going to be really bad enough, two photos.
She wasn't happy about that photo when we took that on the day.
A lot. I was not intending to be in any photos with that hair that day, that is for sure.
It looks cute.
Yeah, and my t-shirt, that was great. That was a great day. And the irony is absolutely not lost on me that is also my name, and the chocolate bar is the Polly Waffle. It's something I deal with on a daily basis, so let's just get that out of the way. So my name is Polly, and I am the marketing manager at Robern Menz. I've actually been with the company 13 years now, so you want to talk dinosaurs, I've been there a really long time. And I've seen a lot of evolution over that time within the business. When we first started, we didn't even have anyone in marketing, so it has certainly been a journey over that time. So I'm not really great at talking about myself, if you want to read, and Robina already talked way too much about me, so I'm going to talk about the company in this slide instead. We're a fourth generation family-owned business, so today we're led by brothers Richard and Phil Sims. We've got a rich history in the state dating back over 150 years, and we have a huge portfolio of brands. The two I think that you're probably most familiar would be FruChocs and Violet Crumble. So FruChocs is actually a heritage listed icon of the state, so that's really exciting. And in terms of brand recall, we are the #1 South Australian brand that's recalled. So really excited about that. Today we're going to talk probably more about Violet Crumble. That is a recent acquisition that we got purchased from Nestle in 2019. And it's really been our journey over the last couple of years to bring that brand to the forefront. When we purchased it, we absolutely knew that it was a sleeper brand. It's a really iconic Australian product. And so we're really excited to talk to you a little bit more about that today.
All right, so let's get into it. So this was an interesting one, as Polly said. It's an iconic brand in Australia, but it was a sleeper. It had been dormant for, was it a decade, Polly? Like about a decade? Quite a long time. So we have to treat it almost like a new brand, but recognize it has heritage that comes along with that. So for us, we have some differentiators that we have to look at with this brand and apply it to everything that we're doing. For Violet Crumble, I mean, look, it's a treat, right? It's a candy bar. It's something you want to treat yourself with. I'm going to say candy because I can.
Please don't. It's chocolate.
Chalk. But it's all about influencing, engaging, building relationships. It's simply about brand love for the most part, right? And yes, we have to align with business goals, but it's just connecting with people on a really human level. So we sort of have 4 things that we look at that runs through everything. So for one, it's an evolution, not a revolution. There was no way, as custodians of this brand after so long, that we were going to pick it up and just completely change it. that would have not gone over well. So the business was very, very careful around how they brought that back in terms of the texture, the taste. They spent a significant amount of time, money, passion in making that happen. So as marketeers, when we've come into it to work with it, we've had to recognize that as well. So we look to embrace the core essence of the brand. There was a lot to work with in terms of we could see old TV commercials and old positioning and a little bit of research, but there wasn't a significant amount of insights that we could draw on. So we were kind of having to look at what we could still see out in the world of Violet Crumble and try and apply what were they thinking back then, and what does that differentiate over today, and how do we modernize that for today? Ultimately, it was all about shattering expectations. It's a loud-ish brand, it's got that a real kind of, when you get into it, and it shatters and it explodes, and so it was always about being quite fun and remaining iconic Aussie. Also for us, timing is everything. So this is a brand that does roll out quite a few new products quite quickly in succession. And how we manage that as marketers is, to be honest, it can be a challenge. We can have things like crossing over right over top of each other. We can have things that we would have maybe wanted to launch 6 months ago, but now we're here now. So how do we keep on top of that timing? And how do we get creative with what strategies and I guess what tools we use? So when does digital and social media lead, and when does PR or above the line lead? And we have some case studies to talk to you about how we've done that, because it's been very intentional with all of those launches. Also understanding consumer context. So our activities have to be iconic, Aussie, tasty, fun. That simple. We can't be too fancy, we can't be too highbrow, we can't take ourselves too seriously. Whilst that sounds fun, there's a bit of pressure and making sure that you always sort of stay iconic and Aussie and stay tasty and fun and stay on top of that brand, but that we really listen to what people are saying. And this is something that Polly, all kudos to Polly, was doing a long time before she had any agencies working with her, was really listening to what people had to say on her social media pages, and that was driving so much of the innovation, the way she learned about the brand. I mean, she let the people teach her what these brands meant to them and what those brands should be. And I think that is an art we can't forget, and we still use quite actively now with all of our digital and social. And then the other bit is about trends, collabs, and influence. And so we'll talk to you guys about that as well, but it's when we can leverage trends, when we use brand collaborations to either help a launch or bring new audiences along for the ride, and when we use influencers, and I know there was lots of questions around influencers, so I'm also happy, we'll talk more about that, but also happy to answer any more questions around that. But how do we use influencers to sort of bolster that fun, that reach, but importantly, reputation is still really big, even in a treat category like this. And we have a quite sophisticated way that we look at influencers as part of our reach engagement, but ultimately as part of our reputation as well. Anything you'd add?
No, I think you covered all of that.
Wicked.
Okay, so there's a lot on this slide. This is our fearless leader, Phil Sims, CEO of Robern Menz, fourth generation family man. Now, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the history of Violet Crumble, because it does have a really long history in Australia. Violet Crumble was actually Australia's first chocolate bar, so it was created back in 1913 in Melbourne by a man named Abel Hoadley. The name actually came from an ode to his wife. So his wife's favourite flower was a violet, so that's where the name Violet came from, and crumble due to the texture. 76 years later, the brand, after much success, and it also been in the hands of Roundtree Hoadleys. I don't know if anyone remembers that. Back in the day, I'm showing my age. So 76 years later, acquired by Nestle, and then 3 decades later, we came along and purchased it. We bought it in 2018, but it wasn't actually until 2019 where we were allowed to, as part of our transitional agreement with Nestle, be able to introduce any NPD, take over marketing and sales. So there was really a year where we were sort of just sitting there, like just really eager to go, planning what our next move was going to be, and getting ready for that launch in 2019. And the first thing we do was we introduced the bag. The bag is back. The bag had actually been a product that Nestle had previously, but was discontinued 10 years prior. And when we purchased the brand, Violet Crumble, it was one of the first questions that we got asked, when you bring the bag back, when you bring the bag back. We already have a honeycomb brand, so we've got our choc, it used to be choc honeycomb, now it's our Bumbles brand. So we already have a lot of experience in making honeycomb. We knew we could make the cubes, we had the capabilities and the capacity, so that was a no-brainer for us. When we actually purchased the brand, we had one SKU, it was one 50-gram bar, and our audience was, as we discovered after we purchased it, male 50 plus. So not an easy audience to target through the channels that we were used to communicating through.
You went, oh.
Yeah, it was. I went the same when I actually saw the data. I was like, "Ooh, this is going to be new." After targeting our female grocery buyers for a number of years with FruChocs in that share format, the 50-gram bar and the male audience was going to be a bit of a challenge for me. I certainly didn't fit into that category at the time. Well, I still don't. So in the last couple of years, we've actually had a huge amount of growth. We've introduced, it's actually over 50 SKUs, because it's not just your caramel, your dark, your nuggets, your seasonal, which is our Easter and Christmas range. We've also introduced a lot of SKUs overseas. So every time we do that, that's new packaging. And as much as it kills me, in the US, it is candy. And that is on all of our packaging. It's just absolutely. So that's been a big learning curve for us. We've got, French in Canada. All our packaging is in French. It's very exciting, but it's a lot of work. So there's been a huge amount of growth. We've doubled our business, but our export has been tenfold. So along with these products that we've introduced, we've also been collaborating with some other businesses as well. So that we've also introduced the Violet Crumble flavoured milk last year, and the Violet Crumble Golden Gaytime ice cream, which was huge for us. We're going to talk about a couple of these launches a little bit later in the case study. But the issue is, with so many new SKUs and so many new products coming to the market in such a rapid amount of time, because we knew that we needed to do this. I mean, we couldn't rely on a 50-plus male audience moving forward. We needed to open up our occasions to families and children, and the seasonal opportunities that gets that additional upsell as well, and those off-location displays, and just being forefront of mind, all throughout the year has been so important to us. And so how do we manage and plan for the launch of so much NPD and get cut through when we're up against these huge multinationals, your Cadbury, your Nestle, your Mars? What can we do as a business with this, one brand to get this cut through? And this is where the next slide, and that is about timing, is everything. So again, we'll talk a little bit about NPD there, but with everything that's going on, it's so important that we can understand the role and timing when it comes to these product launches. So our products, I wish I had, Mao's opportunity to just be able to go, I'm just going to launch a product now, But we rely on grocery, so we've got range reviews. You've got one chance a year to get on a shelf at Woolworths, or one chance a year to get on a shelf at Coles, and they're not the same time, which drives me absolutely insane. So we really led by what our range opportunities are and when that timing lands. And Dena mentioned previously that sometimes they just cross over in a really messy way, and it's our job then to sort of pull them apart and try and work out, well, how do we get noise with this and noise with that and not cannibalise each other? So it's very important for us with all these launches to have a really clear strategy, but at the same time, we need to be flexible because things change. We saw last year that COVID changed everything for us in terms of our marketing strategy. So we relied quite heavily on outdoor and transit for a lot of our launches last year, which we needed to pull instantly. So our focus really quickly moved into more that digital social influencer sphere, and we partnered really closely with society and tapped into their experience around this area, because digital is relatively new for us as a business. We're a grocery product, so traditionally where we would invest is point of sale. So having those multi-site locations in a supermarket and that path to purchase, the beautiful shopper media panels as you walk into the supermarket, that's my heartland. But Dena has been, and society have been fantastic in really opening up our eyes to the power of digital. We've always done social, but more broadly digital, and certainly working with some influencers. So again, with this increased need to focus on timing and understanding do we lead with PR? Do we lead with social? Are we leading with digital or outdoor? Like, how do we do this so that we can get this right? Dean is going to talk a little bit more now about an example, I guess, a bit of a case study.
Oh yeah, we can talk about
We can talk about that. Oh, actually, you've got context. Sorry.
Yeah, some
Go to
context. That's okay. We can lead into it. So with that, we'll give you an example that we'll probably kind of just jump into because it's a good one. But with the consumer context, as she said, it's about listening to what's going on and knowing that, we're across a lot of listening tools. And so we're watching what bloggers, influencers, closed Facebook groups are talking about in terms of what they're snacking on, what they're eating, how they're feeling, all of that. So for us, it's about always going back to Polly and going, well, what's going to make something actually worth talking about? There's only so many times that we can kind of be like, and there's a new product, and there's a new product, because you're still talking about Violet Crumble. So it's not like you're getting to talk about lots of different categories within that. You're still talking about the same style or taste experience for the most part, which makes it a bit of a challenge. So when the team came to us and they had the Violet Crumble Caramel launch coming up, and obviously we know caramel was a huge thing. They actually went before us, which took some wind out of our, ability to say a flavor combination like that is back. What we ended up doing is commissioning some research before we even kind of got to the launch stage to kind of find out what are some flavors that are kind of iconic, again, sticking with that kind of iconic brand stuff. And in that research, we found that 83% of Aussies agreed that chocolate and honeycomb and a caramelized white chocolate was a flavor of a decade, which enabled us to then go start with PR in this sense. We went out to the media saying, this is the flavor of a decade, basically move over caramel, and you can actually even see one of the headlines was that the Violet Crumble caramel is here. And that just little extra bit of consumer context helped us start with some PR and get a little bit of momentum so that when our social and digital came over top of that, we already had a bit of a groundswell of interest on that front. And so when that happened, what we actually did was look into different Facebook groups and what they were talking about. And obviously air fryers last year with everyone home, the pandemic. Who bought an air fryer? I did. Anyone else buy an air fryer? I was just like, oh, let's buy an air fryer because I'm out of ideas. So
we had a lot of meetings where we talked about air fryers for about a month. That's all we talked about.
One evening, we just had this idea of the pizookie. If anyone's ever tried a pizookie, it's basically a cookie in an air fryer. And there was lots of social chatter about this idea of a pizookie. And I think Polly may have asked us, what time of night was it? It was pretty late.
Yeah, so we'd actually, this was always part of our intention. So after the launch of Caramel, we knew we had a lot of media interest. It was like, how do we keep the narrative going? How do we keep the conversation going? And so we'd actually already developed a whole heap of these tasty recipes, beautifully shot, really high quality, quite a bit of my money, out the door there. And then as the campaign was unfolding, this rise of the air fryer, which was just everywhere, and I was like, okay, we need to, and I hate to use the word, but pivot. We need to go, okay, how can we jump on this trend to maximise our opportunity right now and get, again, the caramel Violet Crumble back into the conversation? And it was literally just trending air fryer desserts. And I rang Dean, I think it was probably about 4:30 one afternoon, and I was like, who's got an air fryer? I'd already asked everyone around the office, and at that time I hadn't had one. Of course, now I've invested one. And no one had one. And so luckily, one of Dina's staff members, I think she was an intern at the time, was like, I've got an air fryer, or a mom had one, I think. And we literally sent her home to make this. She photographed it, and by the next morning,
photographed it, she styled it, she seeded it into some Facebook groups saying, I've created this, hashtag Violet Crumble kind of thing. And within one of the groups, I think that had maybe 493,000 users in it, by the morning it had been socially shared 19.66 million times in terms of reach. And we got a phone call from Daily Mail at 9 a.m. in the morning being like, can we use that? So it was awesome because we went from, oh my gosh, caramel went before us, how are we launching this caramel, commissioning some research, getting some talk, going, we need more, to just listening to what was going on with consumer context, being scrappy. Yes, we had done all the glorious photo shoots and we've still used some of those recipes, but we just went, we're not gonna go with that, we're gonna go with this. And it was about 10:30 at night. Maisie was sending me these. I'm like, yeah, they're great. Let's put them up and see if anybody cares. And like loads of people cared. We had radio stations call. I think we actually ended up getting just as much reach off of this Pizookie kind of stunt, if you will, as we did the actual initial launch, which gave us 2 bites of the cherry for one product launch, which is a pretty good way to go.
I think it's also a really good example that you don't need a huge budget, you just need an air fryer basically, and 19 million reach. You're welcome. That's if you take anything away from today. Now, okay, so another way that we try and stay relevant, apart from air fryer recipes, is through our brand collabs. So these have always been a key part of our FruChocs strategy, and with something that we're quite comfortable with and have a bit of experience with. And so when we got Violet Crumble, that 12 months, we had a lot of time to think. And one of the things that we definitely wanted to do was the Violet Crumble Golden Gay Time. So what we wanted to do, we identified other iconic Australian brands that would help us really solidify and amplify our brand positioning. We want to be always known now in that space. Same with FruChocs. I mean, essentially, our strategy is very similar. FruChocs in South Australia, Violet Crumble nationally. So, you know, somebody comes in from overseas, what do? Oh, here, you must try Australian chocolate bar, Violet Crumble. The same way that FruChocs are, you know, we sell a lot through the airport. So being able to partner with such an iconic Australian product like the Golden Gay Time Violet Crumble gives us really, again, that opportunity to amplify and put us into that space that we want to be. And again, it's a low cost / actually makes us money type profitable marketing situation. So highly recommend, if you as a marketer can collab in any kind of way, with whether or not it's with, you know, a product or another like-for-like business, it's a fantastic way to really get double the noise. So cross-category collaborations are important for us in so many ways. It's not just about the conversation, the positioning, but it's literally the ability to have multi-site locations in store, and also to allow our consumers to enjoy our flavours in other ways. It also allows us to be fun. Yeah. So the FruChocs was a great example. It was a bit of a risk, FruChocs being an iconic South Australian brand, but we really knew that we wanted to stay relevant, fresh and fun. And so with the rise of the craft beer, we saw that there was an opportunity there. It actually came about via a Twitter conversation with the guys from Big Shed. So we saw that they had entered a competition, I think it was called Pint of Origin, at Brew Vegas in Brisbane. I just love all the puns. And they had actually presented FruChocs as their beer for the competition. I saw that on Twitter, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, we need to get on this. This is a story. Like, we just need to somehow attach ourselves to this. This is going to be fun. And I knew it was going to be fun. And I wasn't wrong. Craig and Jason at Big Shed are absolutely insane. I don't know if anyone's ever met them or been down to their brewery at Royal Park. They're nuts, but they're fun. So that actually came about. I gave them a call and I sort of said, left a message, neither of them answered their phone, left a message saying, hi, it's Polly from Robern Menz. I've seen your FruChoc inspired beer and I'd like to talk. Apparently they absolutely shat themselves because they assumed that I was going to be sending them a cease and desist letter. But what actually occurred was a photo shoot with the advertiser the next day, which had a full page spread. So that was super exciting. And from there, we actually brought it to a commercial reality. And I think we're in our 3rd year with Big Shed now. And we've actually got a really exciting collab that I can't talk about, but FruChoc Appreciation Day, 20th of August. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm going to say.
But I think also with the brand clubs, it does give from your channel approach, whether that's using digital or social or PR or above the line, again, it gives us different opportunities to talk about different things. How much can you really say about chocolate? But when you can kind of go, oh, but we're going to talk about beer, all of a sudden you're in the conversation all over again. So those brand clubs, they've been great for both businesses, and I really encourage a lot of South Australian brands to look at them more. Shoot for the stars. The fact that these guys got Golden Gay Time of Streets is, as someone who worked with Unilever for years, that's astounding. So I would say, don't be afraid to reach out to some of these bigger brands when you're the underdog and look for an opportunity. And yeah, don't worry about that risk. It'll give you so many more opportunities to amplify your products, have a discussion, and be across platforms. So influencers is another area before we get into case studies that we'll touch on. We do a combination of paid and gifting, depending on what the campaign is. With the caramel, using that as an example, we never create your own piñata, but we created a piñata, which ended up being cheesy sometimes. We get scrappy and crafty. We created, going off the whole way that it shatters, we created a purple violet crumble piñata, stuffed it full of the violet crumble caramel bags, and gifted that to media and influencers with a stick to just whack the crap out of it and have it shatter all over the place. It made for really great social sharings, stories, reels, all of the things. And that was an example of, there was obviously time and cost and kind of coming up with that and gifting it, but that wasn't a paid approach, where sometimes we take very detailed paid approaches, and when we're looking at paid approaches, I think we probably have maybe a different philosophy than some, is that we're really, really intense about it. And that's probably why a lot of big, large brands work with us on influencers. We have different software tools that are really distinct vetting systems. Well, we totally believe it's a relationship and it is not transactional. I get really concerned when I hear about influencers being a transactional, almost like a media buy. I fundamentally believe it's a relationship, it's a reputation thing. Yes, reach and engagement are an outcome of that, but you are missing kind of the whole point of how you can actually create an authentic brand experience and relationship with an influencer that's going to give you reach, give you engagement, reach those tribes or personas that you're trying to reach. But there is a really meticulous way in that you need to do it. And I really encourage you, if you are doing influencers, that you actually look at that approach. It's about really tight briefs. It's about really tight vetting processes. It is about following all of the ANA guidelines. If I see one more brand getting called out for not following an ANA guideline, it is concerning. And those ANA guidelines change often. So if you're not comfortable with them, find somebody who is to help you with that process. But it's not a scary space. It's actually really fun. And it is, I think the main thing I can encourage you with is, don't think of influencers as a transactional media buy situation. Please think of it as a relationship that allows you to reach, amplify, and engage with people who matter to you, who you think you matter to you. And then there's all kinds of ways you can track that, and Mal talked about some really great ways that they track that. It will be different for each business, but setting that up fundamentally correct from the beginning is... Okay, so how we did it in terms of bringing some of this brand back, we've touched a lot on the strategies, but I think if there were 4 takeaways from that, it would be we were clear about where we wanted to play. We knew it was iconic, Aussie, fun, tasty. It was that simple. We didn't really overbake it, except for when we baked Pasuki. We stayed focused. Air fried, sorry. We stayed focused. We used content strategies and pillars around our brand communications framework. So we literally have a very simple comms framework with distinct pillars. We really only do digital and social or influencer work if it fits into those pillars of iconic, Australian, fun, tasty, and brand, which is where we end up getting with our NPD or sometimes sales stuff, especially when like a Coles Express requires us to do so. Or an OTR, but we do have that pillar as well. And staying focused like that really helps you delineate, is that worth spending time on or is it not? We actually really understood the brand. I talked about, initially that we didn't have a lot of information, and then after we bought it, Polly said they were a little bit surprised at where their target audience was. But the way that NPD with the 50 SKUs have certainly helped to expand that is that we've also, from a marketing point of view, extended beyond the functional, but also the emotional side of the brand. Like I've said, there's only so much you can say about chocolate. So what else can you say that matters? And that is when influencers and things like that come in well, the brand collabs. We really start expanding the ecosystem that you can work in. And any brand can do this, whether that is within a more B2B space or a B2C space, FMCG or retail, tourism, anyone can do that. And we know that it takes time. So it's important that your stakeholders understand that it does take time and it does take investment to deliver good results. I talk about Robern Menz as actually a really great case study of a business that has stuck consistently with something. They have consistently stuck with a digital, social, PR, and above-the-line approach They've grown and evolved that, but they've never backed off. They don't go in, out, in, out. That is actually more expensive going in, out, in, out, in, out. Lots of businesses approach us and say, how do these guys get so much social reach and so much social sharing? And I always say, they're consistent. They trust the brand. They trust what they're hearing from consumers. They trust their partners like society. And they've actually been able to decrease their investment. Brands that are trying to do what these guys are doing now are not going to be able to do it as successfully as these guys are like a decade ahead in some ways because they started with some really good fundamentals. So I encourage you that, let your stakeholders know that, but that as you go over time, you will get more returns on that investment. It will become efficient. The price will stabilize if you stay with that consistent delivery model. So what works today, I think Polly wanted to talk a little bit about what worked for FruChocs at the beginning in a social and digital context, and how those objectives are different to Violet Crumbles, and how Violet Crumble actually has to operate quite differently because it is a decade behind FruChocs in terms of where they're at with digital and social in some ways.
So when we started our FruChocs Facebook, or I guess I should say social presence, it was an incredibly different time. It was 10 years ago. There wasn't paid advertising. Organic reach, I think it was like 80% or something. Whoever your audience was, you were likely to reach all of them.
It was the good days.
It was the good old days. Whatever happened to those days? Versus today where, you get 5-10% reach. It can be quite frustrating. And I think Dena talked a little bit about explaining to some of your stakeholders how these things take time. And I'm still constantly trying to tell the business that every time I post something, it doesn't reach 80,000 people, it doesn't reach 100,000 people. It's, if we get 10, 20,000, like that's good, especially for organic. But yeah, we've completely had to change our strategy. So with FruChocs, it was really about just engaging with our audience, understanding them. 10 years ago, our marketing budget was, it was a sniff of an oily rag, and that's really, where, and Dena likes to call us, and it's true, we're scrappy. We've had to be, we've been playing with multinationals for, decades now, and we're a South Australian family-owned business and trying to operate in that same space and steal some of that, share of voice. So, yeah, absolutely. It was, for us, it was really about just tapping into that audience, getting feedback, really almost garnering data as well. I mean, social media is a great way to understand your audience better, who's engaging, what content's reaching what products are resonating with who. And we absolutely use FruChocs to do that. We were really able to capitalise on those early days and the benefits that social media provided us. Today we have to be a lot more sophisticated, and certainly with Violet Crumble, it's much more of a sort of pay-to-play model that we have adopted and that we understand in order to get that national reach. With only, I think we've got the page is very much still in its infancy. I think we've got about 10, 15,000, I should probably know this, number of followers at the moment. But for us, it's really been about understanding our strengths and our weaknesses. So, we, like I said, and I keep on saying, we don't have the budgets of a Cadbury, a Nestle, or a Mars, but what we do have is our scrappiness and, a fairly flat layer in our business. So, I'm responsible for the marketing strategy, I'm responsible for introducing NPD, but I'm also responsible for responding to Janet, who wants to know where she can buy a FruChocs in Brisbane, and I get the complaints, I get all of it. So I get the first-hand feedback, which is like invaluable. If you think about these larger multinationals, you've got the social media team who would report into, a brand manager who would report into a senior brand manager who would report into a market, who would report into a CMO. And that gets lost in translation when you're looking at strategy. So we're able to be super, super agile, and we've just got to recognise, yes, like we don't have these budgets, we don't have these resources, but what we do have is the ability to listen and to act quickly as well. If I want to make a change to a tactic that we're using, I just do it. And I'm sure a lot of you guys would be in that sort of position as well. So don't necessarily look at the lack of budget or resources as a weakness, because it absolutely can be a strength. And it also means that you learn really quickly. It's a baptism of fire, because if you mess up, it affects you in that role as well.
Do you want to do some case studies? I think we only have a little time there.
Sure.
Is that good?
Move on.
Yeah, move convo on, as we say. So I'm just going to talk about the Violet Crumble Milk one for a moment. So And then we have a couple videos, and then I'll try and sneak in some questions as well. But with the milk, this was the collab with the folks at Bickford's, and unfortunately Chris couldn't be here today. But for this one, we decided that we were going to start with a social digital presence first and let that lead. So we actually worked exclusively with Pedestrian TV, and we leaked an early image of the product before it was actually available, and let that speculation kind of run rampant on social media, where people were kind of like, is this real? No way. And we stayed pretty tight-lipped about it until we could actually also then commission some research at the same time to show that 1 in 3 Aussies had been waiting for this honeycomb chocolate-flavored milk for some time. And then we did an exclusive with the advertiser first, being a South Australian company, that then came out and confirmed that yes, indeed, this thing is actually real and it's everywhere. This was actually, we used the term shattering. It had 63 pieces of earned coverage. It had 23 million, actually 125 million impressions in social reach. And all of the sentiment around it was positive, and then it was syndicated across News Corp. So it was an opportunity to show that social and can lead and then influence the PR and then can come back to social, and then our digital supported that. And by that time, people had heard about it by the time our digital was going live. So our cost efficiencies on our digital advertising was great because we already had quite a bit of awareness. I've hit on caramel, so I'm not going to necessarily do that one again in terms of how we launched that, came back around with Bazooki and got that coverage. I'll show a couple of highlight reels, and hopefully these play. If I just... You can hear that?
Story of the day, one of the country's oldest chocolate bars.
Chocolate fans have been sent into a frenzy.
Had a dramatic and liquid transformation.
Well, chocolate fans have been sent into a frenzy.
Had a dramatic and liquid transformation.
Liquid gold being served up in stores nationwide.
And on the back of that, we had caramel right around the same time. So just showing how much social reach and influencers was combined with that. It was obviously loads, and so much so that we ended up getting a phone call from ABC Media Watch going, is this advertising or is this just really good PR and social? And they were just really intrigued to find out that it was just really good social and PR. And we ended up getting some coverage on that as well, which I'll show you in a second. Pinatas. Never make a pinata again, but it worked really well.
You can take one thing away from this story. Never make a pinata.
And is this an ad? I think this was the ultimate. I think when the CFO from Robern Menz said to us, this stuff is where your social, your influencers, your PR and digital working so well that we're selling out of stuff. And then when ABC Media Watch thinks it's an ad and it's not,
For now,
you know
time
you're
for a
getting
quiz.
loads of coverage.
See if you can spot the ad masquerading as TV news. And let's go first to last week's big sugar hit.
Well, chocolate fans have been sent into a frenzy with Violent Crumble releasing its own flavoured milk. The new blend will be served up nationwide, and if customers approve, it could stay on shelves permanently.
That's my son.
Exciting stuff, with 10 and 9 running multiple news reports around the country, and newsreaders licking their lips through the read.
All right, now to what I think is the story of the day. One of the country's oldest chocolate bars has had a dramatic transformation.
The sweet treat hitting shelves around the country this week.
That's awesome, I'm happy to try it.
So, with endorsements like that, it has to be an ad, right? Well, no. That's what you call earned media. The chocolatiers put out a press release, and journalists around the country gobble it up. Is it news? No way. Is it entertaining? Well, sure, if that's your thing. And what about this plug in August, which was another for the purple-wrapped treat?
Famous South Aussie sweet treat, the Violet Crumble, has taken on a new life. It's now in donut form, with maker Robern Menz teaming up with Krispy Kreme.
And what about that one? Was that an ad? No, again. Just 7 news giving viewers the treat they think they want. But now for Crumble question 3, which is a bit more difficult, about this cook-up on 10's Studio 10 last month.
So I think you get the point, which is that if you tie your timing in really well, you understand context, you deliver on collabs, influencers, decide when social or PR goes first, you can get an insane amount of reach and influence for not nearly as significant of a cost. And I know we're done with time, so thank you.
I think we will open the floor to questions. I know it'll delay lunch by a few minutes, but honestly, it's been a real thrill to have Dena and Polly here today. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us today. What an amazing thing. I feel like being featured on Media Watch is like the ultimate PR prize of all time. Was this PR? Was this an ad? Just absolutely sensational stuff. Never mind the fact that we all love Robern Menz, FruChocs and Violet Crumble. There is one question there. We've got a couple more. There's one down here. Okay, looks like we've got a couple.
Wow, that was amazing. So I'm just curious about, so what's the change in your demographic? So you say male 50 plus?
Yes.
And then after this, what happened?
Oh, okay. So, well, the first thing we did was obviously recognise that the male 50 plus wasn't going to be sustainable for any long-term growth. Nothing against men 50 plus. I'm married to one. No, we absolutely needed to look at a younger audience as well. So we looked at our competitor set. Crunchy do it brilliantly. Like, I'm not going to lie. You know, they've got the little fun packs. They're in the favourites. Kids are eating them from like when they're 2 years old in a party bag. And we had a 50-gram bar, which, you know, like I would never give my children. That sounds awful, but I wouldn't. So the first thing we wanted to do was introduce that share format, which then allowed for that family sharing, that portion control. Since then, again, we've brought out these like little bunnies, Santas, the Easter eggs. We've got a 30-gram bar as well that we've just launched. So what we've done is basically increased our occasion. We've also increased our channels. So previously we were just in grocery, now we're in petrol and convenience and variety as well. So we've done all these things to get our products to have, or to be more available to a wider audience. It takes some time really to see that needle shift. We absolutely know from shopper panel data that we're targeting the people that we want to be targeting, but from a brand awareness point of view, we did some research about 12 months ago, so we'll be undertaking some research again soon. So I'm hopeful with all the noise that we've been able to create over the last 12 months that there'll be quite a lot in terms of brand awareness, especially in that 20 and younger, because that's really the 20 years that Violet Crumble Nestle stopped advertising or including Violet Crumble as part of their hero range. That's where we really saw that drop off. But yeah, it'd be really exciting to see whether or not we've managed to claw some of that audience back.
I think that's why you see us doing stuff like on PED TV, right?
Yeah,
We're
absolutely.
actively trying to talk to a younger demographic.
Awesome. Is there a question over here? Yep. Cool.
From a marketing standpoint, what was the reasoning not putting men's on the actual front
That's
packet?
a really good question. We actually did some focus groups. So outside of South Australia, men's it's trying to get FruChocs interstate is like, it's an export market for us essentially. It's a new market with no understanding of the brand or the product. So we knew that while men's had some heritage in the state, nationally it wasn't there. We also, with some sort of blind research groups, found men's is a German name. So when people were looking at a product and they saw men's on it, they automatically thought that it was a European brand, and we needed to be Australian. So we also knew that we had an opportunity in the US for export, and anything Australian is thought of really highly. Packaging is very small, you can't put maps of Australia, etc. on there. So Australia's Violet Crumble, it gives also that ownership back to the people, because the same way that we think of ourselves as custodians of FruChocs as opposed to owners of FruChocs, we feel the same way about Violet Crumble. So it's really about giving Australians who've grown up with it a bit of ownership over the brand as well. So.
Are there any other questions?
Everyone wants lunch.
Oh, yeah, got one right at the back. Last one, Will, and then we'll break for lunch.
Apologise for him. I really found, first of all, we've done an amazing job with the marketing campaigns and thinking outside the box. I think that's super awesome to see. In regards to the PR and the virality that you achieved with the PR, which obviously is the ultimate outcome that you want, Was that intentional in the sense of when you created, for example, the air fryer being a trending kind of, concept, and the PR leaks with the end goal to ultimately, I guess, snowball that effect and have the media, Media Watch being the end ultimate, as Robina said, kind of pick it up to give you that, unparalleled reach? Is that a part of a kind of strategy when you guys sit down and think about?
Yeah, our strategy is bang for a buck with these guys. Like, we actually almost find it a huge challenge. How much more reach can we get for this thing for even less money? So everything we do when we're looking at the strategies is we are trying to continue to find ways that social will lead to PR. PR will come back to the social so that we can piggyback and snowball, using that terminology you did, with the rest of the NPD. So we look across the whole year and we literally map out what's leading us PR, when is this going, because year on year we're just getting more and more impressions, and that's not easy to do. And so being agile and nimble, having somebody like Polly who can make a quick decision certainly helps. But yeah, it's not just an afterthought. It is so intentional because it helps these guys, compete against a Cadbury without a similar budget in a lot of ways. And if we can do that, if Polly can do that, it's a great thing, because at the end of the day, we're not here to try and get brands to spend more money. We're trying to have them be more influential and reach their objectives as a brand. I don't really mind what channel or how much money they have to spend. We just want that to go as far as it can.
Yeah, I think you've both done an amazing job at that, so well done.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, guys. Enjoy your lunch. We'll be here for a few. We'll stand here for a second or two or whatever in case anybody else wants to pop over.
Please thank Polly and Dena.